First of all, let me just start off by saying mental health. What is your perception of mental health? Because we all hear the word mental health, but people don't actually know what mental health is. People actually think that mental health is you're actually mental, you're walking on the road like you're a zombie or something like that. So what would you say your perception of mental health is? Start with you, bro.
Hey, can we start somewhere else now? Yeah. Now, for me, mental health is just about looking after your well-being, looking after your mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? And I think there's good mental health and then there's bad mental health, innit?
Okay.
So I think for me, my thing when it comes to mental health is looking after your mind and your well-being.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so my experience of mental health, I think a lot of it, it impacts your identity, impacts who you are. I think that it still, for some reason, has this huge stigma, even though I think physical well-being and emotional well-being are so interlinked. And I mean, particularly my own experience. So I was at the age of 15, I was diagnosed with severe anorexia, and there was a real. I don't know that people really understood it at the time. I don't know if people fully understand it now because it impacts both your physical and your emotional, your mental. And I wasn't expected to survive. So I think actually being able to understand the link between the two is paramount to being able to break down the stigma and actually create safe spaces for people to be vulnerable about how they're feeling. I think there's still, we always say, hey, how are you? Yeah, I'm good. We don't often really talk about, and particularly in the world we live in now, where everything, we're always showing our show reel, right?
Exactly.
Starting on social media, and I've recently taken myself off all of that because I just think, I just need to be away.
That's true.
I just think mental health is something that we all have. Like Abraham said, like you have good mental health and you have bad mental health. And I think a lot of people suffer with mental health because they don't quite understand their emotions and the background that goes into, why your body reacts a certain way or acts a certain way is based on how you feel. And sometimes when you can put a label to that and you can put it into words so that you can talk to somebody, so that you can express that, that's when people have like a better chance at better mental health rather than worse mental health. So for me, especially as like a carer, as somebody who looks after my little brother, like I try to teach him to like express it, word it, like tell me you're frustrated. For like you see that feeling in your belly when you feel like that, that's nerves. Like understand that it's okay to be nervous and that these things are like part of life and whatever. And that's, I don't know, for me that's kind of like key, I think, to making people have a better perspective and understanding of mental health.
That's very true because like now, growing up, I tend to think that, what I witnessed from growing up, a lot of things people suffer from a young age. It's usually an experience that they've gone through from a young age. And if you can't deal with that problem at that time, as they get older, it increases. But it increases to different things. So let's say, for example, when a child is born of innocence. So when the child is inside the mother's womb, the child feels the emotions of the parents. So if a child is constantly around noises like arguing, the child will be picking up that vibration. So as the child gets older, it starts off, it will kind of start off on like, not say in a back burner, but it'll start off with some negative vibes going around the child. So what tends to happen is, when the child is getting older, if you bring a positive environment for that child to grow up in, it kind of gives the child a better upbringing. But then again, we're in a day and age where parents, there's a lot of dysfunction in families nowadays. I feel that sometimes it's systematically put for there to be a breakdown in families. Because as what happens when the child is growing up, if a child is with sometimes a single parent home or both parents are there, as long as it's a mum or the father and they're working in unison with a child, trying to teach the child different things, they have a better chance of growing up. Because like, let me give an example. Like, my son, I was with his mum at the time, but we kind of split up. We're not together no more. But I felt that when I was in a relationship with his mother, it was a bit toxic to the level where it was best for us to be separate in order to raise my son up in a way where he can grow up and be a positive member to society. Why I say this is because when we was together, we used to have a lot of arguments, a lot of back and forth, and I used to observe and see what my son used to pick up the anger that I used to show towards his mother, because we struggle to have a good dialogue, because it's like we're living in the same household, we're from two different worlds. So I was starting to see certain patterns with my child that he's picking up all the negative energy that I was portraying to his mom at the time. So it made me think, you know what, certain things he was doing, certain things he was saying, I thought, no, if I don't sort this out now, then he can probably lead and get older and go into a destructive path where I don't want him to go down. So sometimes it depends on the upbringing as well from the child from when they're young. Because a lot of these kids now, as they're going into the real world, as they're growing up, there's always something that they've either been through or they've witnessed from the household, whether it is they witnessed abuse from parents, whether in worst case scenarios, some of these kids have been molested by close family members and things like that. So it's difficult for people to express what they've been through, especially at a young age. So I'm saying this, I want to ask you a question. So do you think at a young age, how do we teach children or kids growing up about dangers of mental health? Because I believe that if you get it, you teach people these things from young, they have more of a chance of understanding it from young. As they grow up, then you can try to sway them away from show them how they can express their emotions as they get older. So I just want to
I
ask
think
you that.
that's a good point you made, because like there's so many layers to it. So even what you said about children going through things when they're in the womb, like do you get what I'm saying? And sometimes it can even be one traumatic event that sets people off in it. But someone gave this analogy to me and they said, you know what, in life you're given a toolbox, and your toolbox has all the tools you need to deal with situations that come your way.
Yeah.
And sometimes we grow up and we haven't got many tools in our toolbox. We've got that one tool and we're trying to use it for multiple things. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think in terms of raising children, it's giving them all the tools they need so that if they do run into any of these situations, they know how to express themselves, how to kind of deal with it. And having these conversations are important because they remove that stigma. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes. That's true. Do you have anything?
I can't remember what the actual question was now.
So I think basically what I was saying is, you know, I tend to think that from a young age,
Yeah.
kids, that's how they learn. That's when their mind is like a sponge. They absorb a lot of things, so they absorb a lot of the energy that is put around them at such a young age. So I'm saying, how can we like nurture these kids through these phases? And it's not always. It doesn't have to be like because of the upbringing from the. Even if if growing up in a single parent household, how could we? Because like I said, as a community, we're responsible for all these kids. So we have to like, how can we be able to nurture them from a young age?
I think it's also, you know, I think we're of a generation where there's much more acceptance to talk about mental health now.
Yeah.
You know, my dad, he has had depression all my life. I didn't know that as a child. He just wasn't very present. But in recent years, it's been really bad for him, and that comes from trauma that he experienced when he was a child, that he was never given the tools to process. And I think that it's about teaching people, teaching parents as well, to be able to talk about their emotions. I'm someone who's like, what's under the rug? Let's get it out from under the rug. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. And I was somebody growing up who was quite sensitive but in tune with my emotions, but that wasn't always understood. It was often, oh, she's just a sensitive one. Oh, no, she's the one who's going to cry. I'm like, no, I'm crying because there's a reason to be crying. Something's hurting, and not having that platform to be able to sit, or that space where to say, I'm hurting because. And I think when you're young, oftentimes things will happen when you're very, very young and you don't have the vocabulary yet. And if you're talking about, you know, things that may have happened to us that no child ought to experience, that often comes from somebody quite close within the family or a friend. So then there's that confusion, but that's somebody who was meant to take care of me, and so there's a confusion between what's happened to them and who did that to them. And so then so that child from a very early age carries shame, and they're often told, don't tell anybody. And I think it really is educating parents, educating schools, educating community groups so that there are those safe spaces where a child can, and actually to express themselves, but also know that just as much as saying I'm happy is a relevant feeling, to be able to say I'm sad, I'm hurting, I'm scared, I'm frightened, those feelings are just as relevant. You can't have happy if you don't know what sad is. You know? It's always like, oh, let's shun away from the things that are uncomfortable, and actually we have to go into that place of discomfort in order to come out the other side, and then to be able to help somebody else.
Yeah,
you know?
very true.
I don't know if that answered the question.
No, it's very true.
It makes me went on one.
I basically have always worked with children, so I've got like 7 years experience working with like between 1 and 12-year-old children, and most of it I spent working in a private setting with 1 to 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I remember once, well not once, like our behavioural policy used to be like the happy and sad face, and I don't know, as I got into it and I like started to understand better about children's development and stuff like that, I once raised it in the meeting, like in our meeting, the next meeting that arose, I was like, why do we only teach them happy and sad when there's frustrated, there's the whole spectrum in between, there's anxious, there's this, there's that. And after that meeting, we basically implemented the fact that now we can use, but it was like literally to, like, you couldn't say it, I'd be in trouble. Like if I had said like any other word other than sad when telling a child off, I would be in trouble as a practitioner. So it was literally like a complete change in our approach. And I had left and come back, and they had like emotion cards, and on the emotion cards it's like a face plus all the different types of emotions. I mean, emotions I can't even really label, to be fair, but they're like very visual, obviously because of the age group. And I think, like I said to you before, that teaching children what an emotion is, what that looks like to their body, how the body reacts to that. Like my body used to tremble at things, and I didn't really understand why. And like only now, like in the last couple of years, I'm understanding that's anxiety. That's like you're literally whatever you're thinking about right now. It's like your body is not shaking for no reason. Like, and as a kid, like you say, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't like, what does that look like? So I think it's all important to label, not only label, also display, so i.e. giving them that physical, showing them what that looks like, so they can understand, like, oh, if I get like this is why. And then obviously through that they're able to express themselves better. Whether they choose to or not is a different story, but being able to and saying like, okay, well, this is what's been happening with me and I don't know why, or like I don't know what's bringing this to me, but you can say it. Do you understand? I think a lot of us lack the emotional intelligence to discuss and communicate how it is that we actually feel, and that's what leads to a lot of different mental health problems. Just as much as, you know, I guess if a child's seen things, like you had said, a lot of children witness different things, and due to what they witness, it can have like a detrimental effect on their development. With me, I took my brother when he was 12 years old, and his mental health problems did derive from seeing abuse within the home. So, and a lot of what he was doing and displaying was the exact same thing he witnessed. So when I took him, it wasn't, as much as it was like hard and stuff, it wasn't so much a surprise. Like everyone kind of knew what we saw. So, and with him, he has a hard time processing his emotions. So that's like, when I first took him, that was like the hardest thing, because he'd flip. So there was no understanding. It was just, I'm either okay or I'm mad. There was nothing else.
There's no between.
So, like I say to you, I try to, like, as much as I can, explain to him, like, when I'm mad and stuff, like, when I get it wrong, like, I admit, like I say, like, I was wrong, I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. I was frustrated, I've had a hard day, I've been travelling, like, I'm tired, like, it was just, I shouldn't have acted like that. But I tried to explain to him, like, this is why and this is how I felt before I got to you. So I tried to give him, like, the breakdown of how I feel, and that's not always easy for me, but it's easy for me to do to him, because I know that the outcome it will have for him is a lot more than saying it to, I guess, a friend, and being like, oh, that's my breakdown of how I feel. But yeah, I think when you give kids that kind of tools to communicate verbally, they will do less things that are actionable. So a lot of children act out because they don't have words. A lot of children, you know, either, you know, they go in themselves or stop eating, etc., because they also cannot communicate themselves. If you can say, like, this is what's happening, this is my, even having that safe person to know that too. So it should be your parents, ideally.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that situation, but ideally it would be your parents. And if a lot of our parents weren't taught that kind of emotional intelligence, and I think in this generation, the one thing that we're kind of blessed with is that where we're so, you know, trying and everyone's willing to do new things, I think we've come away from, you know, like you say, like shying from mental health. Everyone's kind of like open that they've been through it. They might not talk all about it, but they can express like, I've been through some kind of experience. And I feel like as many of us start to do that, that's when people feel more included. And feeling included is like something that a lot of people with depression, anxiety, all of them type of mental health issues feel. They feel alone. They feel like nobody else is going to understand. When they're having a panic attack and they can't breathe, that no one else gets it. No one. But it's not the case, because there's plenty of us, and if we talk out, like I say, we start to feel a lot less alone.
Yeah, it's very true.